Okay, in this video I'm going to show you how to edit and create new arrangements of songs. The example I'm using is Praise. Since the original recording, as it's laid out by default, is going to include the sort of the chant at the beginning and the end of the song.
1,
which
2,
will sound,
intro, 2, 3,
if I
4,
skip to
refrain,
it, sound like this. And then if I skip to the verse,
refrain, verse 1.
But what we've been doing for Sundays when we do this song is essentially just taking this instrumental outro and then just making that our new intro. So the way we're going to do that, I've got these locators just to help me more easily find these sections of the song. What we'll need to do first, we know that this is the start of our verse.
Verse 1.
And that right there is the first downbeat of that verse. So I'm going to create that white line just by clicking in the middle of a track, dragging it all the way down, and then I'm going to hit Command E to split, make a split between these two tracks where if I go over here, I still want my count in, so I'll just select this track, Command E, and leave that there. But I'm going to select all of this and get rid of these tracks because I don't need this section. I do want to keep that verse cue.
Verse 1.
But I'm going to take the rest of this stuff here, and this is the first downbeat of my instrumental outro or intro. So if I play it from here,
instrumental,
I want it to start here. So what I'll do is I'll create that line again, drag it over all the way through the ending of this measure, and then I'm going to hit Command C to copy. I'm going to go back to my beginning point. I'm going to hit Command V, and then it's going to be a little bit shorter than the original intro, but that's okay. We're going to work on that. So that way when I hit
1,
my
2,
starting point,
intro, 2, 3, 4.
now if that comes in a little bit too aggressive for you, what you can do is select all of these tracks, and then you can pull them back by about 2 beats, so that 5.3 mark. And then from your first downbeat and then over to the left, just past the end of your tracks, you can highlight and then hit Command Option F to fade. That way it sounds like this.
1, 2, intro, 2, 3, 4.
That way it doesn't, it's not quite as jarring when that first beat comes in so strong, and it gives you a little bit of a quick build into that big intro. Now I know that this guide cue was from the ending of my song. What I'm going to want to do is line up this verse cue in place of this. So I'm going to move my verse over to right here because I know that's where I want to start it. But I want all my instruments of the verse to start right here. So what I can do is, without touching the guide cue, I'm going to grab all of these instrument and vocal tracks, and I'm going to put them right up against this, and then I can just take my guide cue and drag it all the way. I'm going to make sure I get everything before I do that. I'm going to zoom out, make sure I've got all of this, good, and then I'm going to drag it to line up with that locator. Now from here, coming out of this instrumental intro outro, she'll call verse
1,
and then it cuts back to that original verse layout. Now if you want that transition between this intro and the verse to be a little smoother, you can select about halfway through the measure, so that 0.3 mark of this measure and this measure, and then highlight all of your tracks, and then just hit Command Option F, and that'll create a crossfade to where it smoothens out that transition a little better, so where it sounds like this.
Verse 1.
That way it's not as choppy, not as abrupt when it changes from one to the other. Now most of this song from this point on is going to be the same as the recording as far as sections of the song of what we sing, what we play. The only thing that changes really is that we cut the chant at the end again. So I'm going to find where that is. I think it's
refrain,
here.
drums,
Yep. So I'm going to move my ending mark to right there. I'm going to move my outro to right there. I believe that's it.
instrumental,
Yep. And then I know that I'm not going to need anything past probably 2 measures beyond my ending. So I'm going to select, make the line all the way down, hit Command E, and I'm going to delete everything to the right of that line because I don't need any of that. And I can even go ahead, one way that you can ensure that your click track is still the longest, but you don't have to hear it clicking in your ear at the end of a song, is you can click that, make that white line and click Command E, and then hold everything beyond the last
refrain,
call of the
drums,
song. And I can double click, bring this menu up and just gain that down. That way when we crash out, I don't have to keep hearing that click while we crash out, and instead it'll just end.
refrain, drums,
Now we are going to want to fade this out so that way it doesn't end abruptly like this. So what we'll do, you can start maybe, if you want a full measure of a fade or maybe a measure and a half, you can start here. Do what we've been doing, Command Option F, and that way it'll sound like this.
refrain, drums,
Now if you hear 2 things that I'm going to adjust is all of my percussion tracks, so my drums, my loop, and my percussion, they have this sort of, they keep going on that chant, so I'm going to drag the fade point a little sooner for them, so that way it doesn't sound like the song is going to keep going when we're ending. So I'm going to drag each of these individually a little further in. And then the last thing is that you hear those vocals start the chant. We don't want that for this arrangement, so what we can do is just select these vocal tracks and then just trim them down to right there, and then that way our ending sounds like this.
refrain, drums,
And last 2 things, I'm going to go ahead and shorten this to make room for our next song. I still want it to be longer than the rest of my tracks. Now what you're going to want to do is, if you have an option to use a pre-recorded selection of guide cues, so
big ending,
this sort of thing, you can just drag and drop it in. If you don't have that, what you can do is just drag your guide track all the way out until you find where she would call ending, so right here.
ending,
And then you can just copy and paste that. So highlight it, and I don't need all of this, so I'm going to trim it back to be in line, and then I'm just going to click this point right here, Command V to paste, get rid of that. That way she'll call ending,
ending,
everything fades, and we can go on to the next song.